Hello and welcome back. This is Susie in conversation with Simran on matters that matter. And today we're going to be discussing something really relevant and very, very important. Is depression a dirty word? So Simran, a couple of days ago, which is I think a day after Mental Health Day, on the 11th of October, you wrote a post on Instagram. And this post spoke about a secret that had been hiding with you for several years, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to briefly read a passage from that post, which will set the context of today's discussion. You mentioned on that post that 3 years ago, I had reached a point in my life where I could no longer carry on. I had no will left to live. I didn't see a future for myself. And I was in incredulous amounts of pain. I had been like that since I was 11. So I was suffering for a decade. It had taken a toll both on my body and my mind. I was bullied in school, severely emotionally abused. 3 years ago, I took the decision to heal myself and to find answers. My body had run out of the capacity to carry this on any longer. I had hit rock bottom. So first of all, Simran, I am really interested in knowing what prompted you after 3 years of intense pain and a decade of being in hiding to write this post.
So like you said, I wrote it after the Mental Health Day. So on that day, there was a lot of talk about mental health on social media. And I had been toying with this idea that, whether I should talk about it or not. And my intention to talk about it was not for me. It was for people who are struggling, because I know that a lot of people are struggling and all of them are in hiding. So there were two main reasons why I wanted to do this, and they were related to what I experienced when I was going through what we can call depression. And those two things were shame and hopelessness. So what happens is that when people don't talk about these things and they are not normalized, you feel like you're the only one in the world who's going through this, that everybody else has got their life together, they know how to do life, there is something wrong with you, that you're not being able to adjust yourself into the world as well as the others. So that fills you with a lot of shame, which can make recovery and seeking help really, really difficult for people, because they live with this belief that there is something broken and wrong with me. Also because of how people treat you, they treat you like there's something wrong and broken with you. So my first reason was to kill my own shame, to tell the world that there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, that we have made dysfunction normal and you've made disorders out of human beings. These are not disorders, at least as I like to look at them. They are just this is how we adapt to the dysfunction around us, is also what I discovered during my journey. So I wanted to take out the shame out of the experience,
Okay. This is a really important point you're making, Simran. And I think whilst you said that it wasn't for you and you did this so you could inspire others to also own their depression or other kind of mental agitation or anxieties of whatever form. But first and foremost, you did this so that you could face the inner demon of shame and conquer it.
Yes. So because I knew that shame is something that everybody who goes through something like this, everybody who's struggling in life goes through shame, because we as a society don't like to talk about struggle. We are obsessed with happiness as a destination or as an aspiration. And anything other than that is something that is not acceptable to us, which is rejected. And that's why I like to call it the emotional dark age, because that is very different from the reality of being human, which involves a whole spectrum of emotions which are equally important and which serve a purpose in our lives. So that's why there is so much shame associated with struggle. And the second thing I spoke about is hopelessness. That is another thing that I really struggled with when I was depressed and in that much pain, because one of my major worries during that time was, will I ever get out of this? Will my life ever get better? Is it always going to be like this? And I saw that whenever I used to lose hope is when I used to be pushed to the extremes. As long as I had the hope that no, it can get better, I still had something to hold on to and carry on. And the reason I used to lose hope was again because there was no visibility. Now mental health has become a trend and it has become a talking point, and everyone's talking about it, wants to be associated with it. But even 2 years back, there was nobody talking about it as openly as people are today.
So there was the issue of acceptance. Or
Yes,
rather the fear of rejection, you mean?
Yeah, but more than that, it was just coming out and telling somebody, even if one person read my post or reacted to it, just telling, if somebody was struggling, just telling them that there is hope and recovery is possible, and to be that example for people. I remember frantically searching for stories of recovery and hope when I was going through it. But what I realized was that most of the stories of struggle that I came across promised this happy ending of greatness. Struggle was not spoken about. There was no gold in the struggle. Struggle was always spoken about either as a means to an end or an obstacle to get rid of. So again, it was not normalized. Your struggle is only valid if you become great after that. There were stories about the most famous athlete in the world who came out of depression, but it was always focused on the victory afterwards. Now, those stories, when I was struggling, when I saw those stories, sometimes they filled me with shame, because I was comparing. I was like, I am not being able to convince myself to sometimes wake up in the morning. And that goal of achieving greatness just seems too far away for me.
This is again something which is very important for those who are with people or who are caretakers or family members of those who are suffering with depression, that they need to understand that the person who is depressed feels like they are constantly drowning, like they're being sucked into a vortex, and they are grappling for that little straw of hope, something that they can reach out for and stay afloat. And in your case, you said that you were really looking for other people who were willing to talk about their shared pain, their shared struggle. But unfortunately, what you found was that all of the stories that were disclosed at that point in time were stories with happy endings.
Yeah.
And the happy ending could perhaps add to your own depression further, because it seemed you were so remote from that happy ending yourself that at that point in time, to think that you'd ever get to a happy ending in itself is a terrifying thought, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, there is nothing wrong with talking about greatness and happy ending. And sure, we can talk about the good that comes out of suffering and pain. However, there is a great need to normalize the process, not just with a goal in mind, to not make it aspirational only. And since you mentioned caretakers and family members of people who are struggling in any way, I just want to talk about the fact that most people, when you share with them that you're going through something, they look at you with pity, and that is the worst feeling that a person who's going through something can feel. And that was also one of my greatest fears before sharing this, because I didn't want this to become my only identity. I didn't want to be put into a box. I wanted to be treated like a normal human being all along who was having a normal human experience. Because people kind of sideline you that, oh, she's having an experience that she's not supposed to be having as a human being. This is the biggest misconception.
So do you think this, you feel that having depression becomes like a disability label for the rest of your life and it defines you?
Yeah. When people have an illness, they might say, I have cancer. It's not made a part of their identity. But when people have depression, they say, I am depressed. It becomes who you are, or who people see you as. And also because I spoke about how difficult it is for people to deal with emotions because they're never taught how to. Um, when people see someone crying or someone in pain, first of all, people get very, very scared because they don't know what to do. Second thing that people do is they try to fix the person. And the minute you try to fix someone, the message you send to the person is that you are broken because you are not going to
Yeah,
try to fix something that is not broken. So the message you
true.
get is, I am broken. The another message that you get is that you are telling the person that this state of pain or suffering makes me uncomfortable, so please change it.
So it is a rejection of sorts there, that
Yes.
I am willing to take all the good parts of you, and I'm willing to engage with the happy parts of you, but I'm not willing to own and engage the unhappy, miserable, dark parts of you. And I think which is why I love the term you use, that you define this as the dark emotional age. And I wanted to ask this question, that a lot of people your age shy away from talking about this battle with depression for some of the reasons that you very vividly mentioned. When you were at that precipice, at that point, that inflection point where you were deciding that should I or should I not speak about this? Should I go public? Should I disclose my affliction? Particularly given that you have also been in the past seen to be a very brilliant student, very accomplished person with many talents, and this is diametrically opposite, because one expects that a winner is always a winner and a winner can never be hurt, or a winner can not be human, and they dehumanize a winner for some reason. What was your conflict at that point in time?
I think exactly what I spoke about. Judgment, the fear of being put into a box, and the biggest fear, I think, which I have been personally grappling with inside me, of me also, is what you spoke about, this image that I had of my own self, which was basically an accumulation of other people's perception of me. It wasn't really my own, which I discovered, of who Simran is supposed to be and who she's expected to be in the future. So I think most of the fear comes from attachment to that image and image management, because
Mm.
I think the ego mind, the I, really really struggles with, if I am not this, then who am I? And that I is constantly looking for something external to attach to, and when I purposely didn't give it anything to attach to externally, my struggle became really really difficult. So that fear of being seen a certain way and completely losing, I went through this phase also where I felt like I'd completely lost everything. I'd lost my own self, I'd lost everything I had in my life, and I went through a very long grieving period for that. Even now sometimes it comes up. My biggest concern about talking about it for was, of course, fear of how I would be seen, how I would be perceived, and my journey being seen as very unidimensional. Like I said, when you mentioned to someone that, oh, I suffered with depression or any of these labels, they only tend to see you as that label. But my journey is so much more complex than that. In fact, I don't even sometimes like using the word depression to describe what I was going through, um, because there was so much more to why I did what I did and why I was suffering through what I was. So I really don't like how my journey can be simplified like that.
Yeah,
but i
yeah,
chose but I chose to use that word because that is the most easily understood word, most popularly used word for symptoms like that. And so I thought that reaching out to people and making them understand would be easier if I use that word for my journey. So that was my reason for even using that word.
sure.
But these were my fears. I have developed a method, you can say, of how I deal with fear now, of how it shows up in my body, and now how I sort of deal with it. So what I've realized is that questioning fear the thoughts that it presents is very, very, very important. And interacting with fear is very important. Most people think that fear has to be rejected, it has to be conquered, and it has to be fought. And if you fight fear, it just becomes stronger in you. Then you're going to be at the mercy of fear. So even with the post, I saw the consequence that there are going to be maybe ramifications of being my whole self or revealing my truth. Am I okay with those ramifications? Do they make a difference to who I am for me? And they didn't. I reached to a place of peace with that first before I did it. So even if that happened, I was okay.
So if you're enjoying this conversation, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. So Simran, I'd also like to know that you mentioned that eventually it becomes an issue of image with regards to disclosure.
Yeah.
There is the way that the world wants to see you, and that's the image that you want to project to the world.
Yeah.
But when you are trying to own depression or trying to talk about it with others, you're really struggling with the image issue that I'm not going to be seen in the way that I want to be seen, and people are going to see me in some dark way where they are just going to discount my worthiness, my capability, and everything that I stand for. And then suddenly I will be excluded from the heroes group, so to say. So what was the hardest part of your journey, knowing that you who were once seen to be the hero are now struggling with something which is the opposite, perhaps, or the human aspect of the hero's journey, which is the struggle?
You know, I'm not now struggling with it. I was always struggling with it, even when I was the hero and I was seen as the hero. It's just that people didn't know about it because they didn't want to know about it. They only wanted to see certain sides of me. And it is particularly that realization that a lot of times, you know, when people used to come and talk to me about my own self, they had these ideas about me, which when they told me, I was like, I'm not like that at all, or that's not my life at all. And yet I was so attached to them not having a different image of me, to them still having the false. So I think the hardest part was, like you said, because my identity was an amalgamation of what my parents thought of me and what everyone else thought of me and what I also then thought of myself. It was not just them. You also get attached to that image because, you know, I think humans have this deep urge to be seen as good. And since struggle is associated with being bad, you don't want to go there, you don't want to be associated with it. So I think what I struggled with the most was this conflict between my identity and who I was, what my truth was. And what I struggled with a lot was explaining my existence beyond productivity for a while. Because, like I said, my image, a lot of it was derived from what I was doing in the world, the things I was associated with, institutions I was associated with. And when I didn't have anything external to grab onto and hide behind it, that, yeah, you know, people constantly hide behind checklists, that I have fulfilled everything on the checklist. Now everyone's going to leave me alone and I finally deserve to exist. When I didn't have anything to hide behind, I felt extremely scared of again being ostracized, being, and you know, I did get judged. I would not say that it didn't happen, it was all in my head. I was judged. I did lose relationships and people from my life who couldn't see beyond or couldn't understand me beyond these labels and these achievements.
So you were worried about questions like, what are you doing with your life? And
That's exactly what everyone
since you
asks
didn't
you,
have
right?
you didn't have this list of accomplishments to talk about, or say, oh, you know, I'm doing this, and all the things that people think are worthy of chasing, you weren't doing those things because you took time off to attend to yourself, and
Yeah.
that in itself became a difficult thing to work through, you say.
Yes, because what happens is, like I was talking earlier, I was talking about how people look at you like you're broken. What happens is that you also internalize that conditioning. And then you also look at yourself like as if you're broken.
So it's not just people judging you, it's you judging
You
yourself
judge.
too.
That is very difficult. I think self-judgment is a very, very big part of this, because the lens with which you view yourself is often not your own lens. It is other people's. And I had to come to that realization and ask myself repeatedly, sometimes many times a day, that whose lens am I using to look at myself at this moment? Is it my lens, or is it my conditioning that has told me to be a certain way? And it's funny how, even if our identities are causing us suffering, we still cling on to them because there is this illusion of security in that, in acceptance in that. And I think primarily this is a conflict between authenticity and attachment, because again, all of us have this deep need to belong and attach to people and be accepted. But somehow, right now in society, that is at odds with our authentic expression a lot of times. So people really have to make a choice.
Yeah, I want to just pause here to point out a very important thing for, again, the family members and those associated with people who are undergoing depression, to be able to fully grasp the importance of this very important aspect, that on the one hand, the person is feeling very, very dejected, very judged, very vulnerable, very scared of how the world is looking at them. But simultaneously, what is making that even harder is the fact that there is so much self-judgment, and that they are actually telling themselves repeatedly, I'm useless, I'm broken, I'm worthy of nothing, no one loves me, I'm not capable of love, I'm not deserving of love. And I want people to become attuned to this understanding how much suffering and pain this individual is going through. And therefore, the smallest, I wouldn't say the smallest criticism, perhaps, or even the smallest observation in a negative way can break this person completely. So if somebody walks into the room and tells a depressed person, I mean, don't you, in the day, and don't you think you should get up and brush your teeth or wash your face? Even that can land a severe criticism. And it's a reaffirmation of the fact, see, I am so terrible that I can't even do something like brush my teeth. I'm focusing on this so that people understand that the only thing that a depressed person needs is very careful nurturing, reassurance, love, and being told, I understand you're in pain and I'm there for you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't think that happens enough. Did you ever find anyone relating to you like that or in that manner?
Yes, I did have a couple of friends, and I was very lucky to have a couple of mentors in my life who held that space for me, where I was just witnessed. You know, there was no attempt to fix me, there was no attempt to change me or tell me what I needed to do. There was just safe and loving witnessing that happen. And I think that's so important. I think we all need a witness in our lives who holds that space for us, and we also need to develop that witness within us. By the end of it, even if you have people in your life who are supporting you, but you yourself don't approve of yourself, you yourself are in resistance to the fact that I am struggling and I'm in pain, and you're constantly dealing with the thought that I shouldn't be in pain, that can become the biggest obstacle to recovery.
So you're saying, I'm struggling, I'm in pain, and it's okay for me to struggle and be in pain is very important.
Absolutely. And I think the only way that we can reach a point where it becomes really okay for us is to understand why we are struggling and in pain, to give our pain a context. Because without that context, you'll constantly be struggling to figure out why this is happening to me.
So are you saying the pain and the suffering arises from that context?
Yes.
What is that context?
Well, that is different for everybody, based on their personal experience and journey through life. What has caused that dysfunction in them? The
Correct.
root of it. If you try to just treat the symptoms and just somehow feel better and make feeling better your aim without really understanding why is this happening to me? Why am I feeling like this? If you really take time to understand, you will reach a point where everything makes sense. All your behaviors make sense. Your procrastination, your perfectionism, whatever it may be that you are struggling with, will make sense if you really dig deep.
So you're
So,
saying
giving context.
journey back to the causal issues that
Yeah.
that originally broke you, because no one is originally broken, but
Yeah,
some
exactly.
experience or sets of experiences in life that break you. You need to go there and you need to repair them and you need to make yourself whole again. Wonderful. So, what is the one most important thing that helped you in your battle in slaying this demon of self-judgment? And much as I know you don't like to use the word depression, but because we don't have another word that is commonly understood,
Yeah.
we'll say, how did you, what was the one thing that helped you overcome your battle with depression?
Not seeing it as a battle at all, by giving up resistance to the fact that I was depressed, and by not overly identifying with the label. So, what I did was I made the focus of my intention truth at that point of time, to really understand why and get to the root of who I was, what was going on within me, how did I function, instead of getting better. My intention was not getting better at that point. It was initially, but it changed quickly because I realized that if my intention was getting better and only getting better at that point of time, I would have given up very, very quickly, because things got way worse before they got better.
Yeah.
Right? And my suffering increased in a lot of ways. So if I was scared of suffering and if my only aim was to get rid of the suffering, then I wouldn't have walked the path that I did. I would have chosen some other path. So what helped me in my battle with depression was not treating it as a battle at all, to letting it be and understanding why it was there. I turned curious, I turned compassionate, and I stopped trying to fix myself because there was nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. So there was a compassionate acceptance that started you and put you on that journey, and then working through and deconstructing the prisons of your mind
Yeah.
and all of those labels that you were assigning to your own self, and all of the expectations that you were trying to fulfill for other people and not really for yourself. You went searching for your true self, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Great, great. And what is your message to your cohort? Because there are so many young people who I find suffer from these problems, but they don't want to even speak about it to their best friends. And sometimes that can really become isolating for them. And we need to make this normal, as you said. We need to normalize struggle. We need to humanize our experience and say, hey, that's okay. We need to celebrate our struggle as much as our victories. So, what
Yeah.
is your message to the youth?
I think when I talk right now, I don't want to be just talking to people who know that they are struggling. I want to be talking to everybody because I really feel strongly that all issues are collective issues. They're not individual issues. If somebody is struggling through depression, it is because someone around them or their environment was dysfunctional enough to then transfer that dysfunction within them. So everybody needs to be careful. This is not just an issue of people who are going through mental illness. Everyone needs to listen to this. I think the first thing I want to say is that please understand that, like I said before, society has made dysfunction normal and disorders out of human beings. You are not a disorder. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. Don't feel that you're not normal. There's nothing normal. What is normal right now is trauma, and you are just having a perfectly normal response to it. So first of all, normalize for your own self, your own ways of adapting to whatever it is that has happened to you and your history, whatever that might be. I hope that you can feel that you deserve the help, the time, the space that you need to recover, because you do. And third thing that I want to say is that stop fighting with yourself. Stop fighting yourself, your condition, your fear, your shame. Stop fighting them. They're there for a purpose. They're there to deliver a message. Get intimate with them. And also understand that having it all together all the time is not a sign of strength. Sometimes a sign of strength is taking rest. Because, like I said, it was the toughest thing for me to allow myself to take rest. That is what requires strength. Vulnerability is what requires strength in today's world. Showing emotion, talking about it, standing up for yourself is what is actual strength. Doing what everybody else is doing and expecting you to do is not strength. That is actually weakness and compliance. So I think a change in perspective, and I think everyone, another thing that please remember that there is no thing as fearlessness. Courage and fear exist simultaneously within us. That's my experience. There's no point where I'm rid of fear. Fear is supposed to be there. Fear is an integral part of who we are. It's important. So reach a place where you have the agency to make the choice, get the right help, surround yourself with people, only people who love and support you and hold that space for you. And people who have already recovered, I would really like to urge them to, because I know this journey can be very transformative. And I would like to urge them to come forward with new perspectives on the world and on themselves and life that they might have gathered through their experiences and share it with the world, because I feel like the world desperately needs that.
I totally
That's
agree
it.
with you, Simran. Thank you so much for very bravely and very vividly sharing your journey with us. And I totally agree with you. People who have overcome this struggle, this internal struggle, I'll call it a crisis of the soul, and a battle with the dysfunctions that others impose on you. You are a product of that. And perhaps it is only important that you volunteer and offer your service to those who are still struggling with it, or who don't know how to find the pathway that you have discovered. And so I'm really glad that you chose to share it with the world, to go public with me, with your victory, perhaps, and it is a happy ending. So I think that is brilliant. And but I would also like to mention here, there is another very important point you make, and I want to end today's very important and wonderful discussion with that thought. Trauma is normal. And I want every one of us to understand this, because, that's how God designed the universe. And when we look for what's normal, we look to nature. And when a baby is born, a baby doesn't just pop out easily, naturally, without trauma.
Yeah.
The baby struggles through the birth canal. The mother struggles to assist it through the birth canal. They both go through the shared pain, collaborating and assisting in the journey of birthing. And I think in a very similar way, we must all come together to collaborate and assist each other at points and times of our life when we are struggling to birth an understanding of our true selves, or when we are trying to birth a new capacity or a new potential in ourselves. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and will be back for more matters that matter. And I hope you remember to like this video and to subscribe to this channel. We'll be back with more matters soon.